He is the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army for the Central Texas region. He is the CEO of Centex Technology, a boutique IT consulting company with global reach. He is an altruist. He is a venture capitalist. He does work with the Boys and Girls Club. He is a cybersecurity expert. He is a first-generation American, and he is the senior technical mentor, an emeritus position bestowed uniquely to him by the Commanding General and the Secretary of the Army for the Army Software Factory. And so much of our success is owed to his personal expertise. Without further ado, let me turn over the podium to a very, very dear friend of all the soldiers at the Software Factory and Army Futures Command, Mr. Abdul Subhani.
Thanks, Guido. Appreciate those nice remarks. It's great to see everyone, at least downstairs, if not right in front of me, everybody. But it's a good sign that we are getting to a little closer to a normal sign. Let's take a moment to pat ourselves on the back as we have Army, Department of Defense, tech sector, and academia all here to collaborate on pressing national security issues. A few years ago, things like this just did not happen. And both Army Futures Command and this great Austin ecosystem are the reasons we can do it now. Most of you, they are probably wondering, what the heck is a CASA? Well, truth be told, it's a fancy way of saying I get to advise Secretary Wormuth on Army equities in Capital Region of Texas. So this is a great opportunity for me to get a fresh perspective back to her. I'm going to try and get through this talk without saying Kubernetes, but I make no promises. It is my pleasure to be here talking to you about defense software innovation, the question of how to move forward and the timeline for transformation is a much needed conversation in our defense industry. In the last couple of years, we have done a great job on having solution-oriented discussions and inspiring innovation and change. Today, I would like to discuss why transformation is needed, how it can be supported, and who is creating innovation changes in our Army. Offer caution on pitfalls to avoid and express the urgency for transformation. So let's start. Why is change needed? Army modernization is more than simply improving our lethality and communications on a future battlefield. A battlefield which history cannot define for us. We must harness information in the 21st century. This includes winning below the threshold of conflict in the competitive phase, not just exclusively during traditional conflict. The future operating environment will require coders at the edge. In fact, this already occurs in the present. We know Special Operations has had great success by embedding coders and data scientists within their teams. Project Convergence already revealed the larger Army has this need. Both the Navy and the Air Force continue to experiment in Project Overmatch and JADC2, respectively. If that wasn't enough, the Army Software Factory is inundated with requests for support from commanders right now. Future warfare will be won by a commander's ability to rapidly use information streams and make better decisions faster than our adversaries. Building this leadership competency will take time and experience in a perpetually evolving industry. Fortune 500 companies are already looking to lower the barriers to faster and more ubiquitous software development capabilities. To remain competitive, we cannot hide from this change. We have got to embrace it and begin bridging the digital divide and transforming our legacy workforce to an information age workforce, the workforce for our future. Donald Rumsfeld is credited with saying, "You go to war with the army you have, not the army you might want to, wish, or have it at later time." This means building better software for the Department of Defense is now. So we won't look back and wish we would have made technical changes sooner. Cybersecurity concerns are growing at an exponential rate, and Department of Defense software is at the heart of these concerns. Instead of being a point of vulnerability, it should serve as a mechanism to better protect our military. So let's talk about how can change be supported. Supporting organic efforts that aim to directly involve service members in the software development process is a paramount. These service members are the end users, and modern software is only successful and effective through user-centered design. Embracing DevSecOps culture is a must, and this has become a bit of a buzzword recently, but that does not make it any less true in this age of technology. Agile software development and cloud as an operating model is a big of a stretch for today's Department of Defense. We have got to get serious about responsibly amending the traditional risk management process, and I think you will hear more about that later today. Agile acquisitions are another imperative. Gone are the days that we should look at large-scale monolithic software solutions as the answers to our problems. Instead, we should be continually seeking collaborative opportunities that allow industry and Department of Defense to improve outcomes. A focus on open standards and open architectures, kind of obvious here, but we are still stuck in a legacy way of doing business. We, as government, sometimes making decisions based upon the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way out. Now is the time to rethink that, and we see how we can move the ball forward. So now let's talk about who is creating the innovative changes in our Army. The Army Software Factory is a great step forward for our Army. It follows a series of similar efforts across the Department of Defense. I'm particularly impressed with the focus on soldier involvement and their commitment to partnering with both Silicon Valley and operational Army units. The slogan says it all: by soldiers, for soldiers. In addition to building competence in agile software development for soldiers at the edge, the Army Software Factory focus on soldiers has already paid dividends in showing policymakers a new perspective on the tech problems facing our Army. This includes asymmetric access to information and overclassification of information that leads to poor business decisions, and the notion that the legacy system fails to reveal basic technology shortfalls of soldiers' life. It is hard to avoid mentioning Kessel Run here. They did and continue to do a great job with the CRMF process. I'm excited to see the collaboration over these next 2 days between Army and Air Force on this. The Enterprise Cloud Management Agency, Paul Puckett, and the Army CIO, Raj Iyer, clearly sit right alongside Army Futures Command and at leading edge of improving software throughout the Army. This includes co-developing the Army's enterprise DevSecOps playbook, providing a common IT stack for development and hosted workloads, and guiding the department to the 21st century technology decisions. As the federal government continues to get pushed into the operations into the cloud, we have to better leverage such investments. Paul Puckett and Raj Iyer are making sure this happens in a way we haven't done before. To the local Austin industry players are here. For many of you, your desire to build a better future for our children far outshines the goal of simply making a sale. We are incredibly lucky to have such a well-intentioned innovation ecosystem here for collaboration. And what are some pitfalls to avoid? I think first, avoid trying to do everything all at once. We all know that doing too many things at once does not work, and it's especially true in technology. While we can have the fastest processor in the machine, we still need time to process the work. Second, we cannot neglect the acquisition community. We need to work with them and educate them in the changes we are trying to make, why those changes are relevant, and how they can become a beneficiary of those changes in this process. And finally, innovating at the expense of unity of effort. Avoid innovating in silos. We must continue to collaborate in these forums and to use our collective lessons learned to communicate with policymakers looking to move the ball forward. Together is the only way we will successfully modernize our Army and show our adversaries that we mean business. If I have not already made the timeline for transformation clear, let me say that the time is now. We cannot wait. When it's time for war, let's be sure we are still fighting with the best and the most powerful military force in the world. Thank you for your time. God bless Texas. God bless United States Army, and God bless the United States of America. I think now we will have a little Q&A session with Lieutenant Colonel Guido and a short break. Thank you.
Why should your business go hybrid? When I'm in a race, I should be focused on taking a corner. But what if I had to run around, worried about engine temperatures, thinking about changing tires? That's how some businesses manage their clouds. But with a hybrid cloud approach with IBM, you'll have the expertise of a team designing best-in-class strategies for your business, the same way a pit crew makes this car hum. So you can focus on, winning.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We have the honor of having a little bit more of Mr. Zabani's time, and so we thought it great to just do a fireside chat. We're also monitoring the Q&A coming in live through the website, so feel free to post some questions if you have them. But in the meantime, I thought it would be a great way for us to get to know the local civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army a little bit better, who's been so invested in this local Austin ecosystem. So, sir, first question. It's sort of a personal question.
Sure.
Somebody who is so successful in business, what attracted you to this role in an official capacity with the Department of Defense when obviously you didn't need to do that? Why are you spending so much of your time on this topic?
Well, thanks, Vito. So my background is a little bit unique than the other civilian aid to the Sec Armies. I came here as an international student to States and did my universities, undergrad and grad, and then got to able to start my own company. Very much involved in the Association of United States Army in Central Texas area in Fort Hood. Got to meet a lot of general officers and got to meet a lot of people at Fort Hood. Got involved in the local community. And get to see that there's a lot of things that can be changed as a business, that how we are doing technology. And as there was an opportunity came to be the civilian aide to the Sec Army for the Capital Region. And I've been very fortunate that General Murray and a lot of his command got to talk to me about what exactly we should do to make that change in the technology field. And I'm lucky to have to work on the software factory, of course. And so it's been a journey, but it's been great.
So you obviously wear so many hats, but this question is more towards your CEO hat as the CEO of Centex. Where do you see, why do we sometimes say that either Army or DoD has trouble working with either industry or non-traditional industry or small businesses? I'm sure you have an interesting perspective on that kind of stuff. What's your observations from firsthand experience?
I think that's exactly what was the conversation I had with General Milley at that time and General Murray as well, is that what exactly we are doing, we as a United States Army, to collaborate with small businesses. A business who has an idea but does not have the resources to go and hire business development people or hire the salespeople who understand not just the Army, but the Department of Defense itself. Because small businesses does not have the resources to hire BD people, capture people, write RFPs and RFIs, responses, and so forth. So what we can do to make that easier for them. So that's the idea, of course, Army Futures Command initially was. And then, of course, Army Applications Lab has really did a great job on creating that ecosystem for small businesses or startups, for that matter, of having that great idea that they have, but they are not able to maybe scale it, but that may be helpful with Army Applications Lab and others that they will be able to do. So yes, absolutely. I think there are still small businesses who have a great idea, who does not have the resources to go Department of Defense or Department of Army to go and market that idea. So we created that, I think, as an Army Applications Lab and Army Futures Command, where these things can at least start having those conversations in a very initial stages.
Right, and we've had some initial successes here, specifically in Austin, with the Army Applications Lab and with the Software Factory specifically. And here at Fed Supernova, there's quite a few startups and non-traditionals that are here literally today and tomorrow to try to do business with the Department of Defense. What would your advice be to them as while they're here?
I think relationships, creating relationships, having relationships with the agencies. Go talk to them. I think this is a perfect spot where you are able to meet with academia, where you can meet with the industry, we can meet with the agencies, you can meet with the directors themselves, what needs that they have, and how you can focus and understand the needs of them. I think that's probably the easiest way to get your foot in the door for small businesses, especially when they do not know or understand what exactly Army is looking for. Same thing with large organizations. Sometimes responding to an RFP without knowing, understanding what exactly that RFP is wanting, it can be hard for a small business to understand the whole process of it. So I think it's a good idea to have these collaborative small conferences, forums where they can come and have those discussions.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah. Let's maybe take that hat off. Let's put on a different hat, and let's go back to you being the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army and the senior technical mentor to the Software Factory. Peter Thiel wrote a very famous book called 0 to 1. And as you're coming in with fresh eyes, and we're moving basically from 0 to 1, what's your sense on how we're doing?
I think it's a start. We are trying our very best to make that change to just this Army Software Factory idea. That one was not just the idea now within 9 months to 10 months. Thanks to you, Vito, and Jason, and a lot of other staff members, and of course, thanks to the Jeremy Murray and CSM to make that happen. I think it's one of those things that if we will not start thinking out of the box ideas for the Army or Department of Defense itself, we will have a hard time down the road in the next 10 to 15 years where our adversaries are already doing or have done already something similar or anything to that nature, where we are thinking that how we can utilize not just our contractors, not our private industry, but also our soldiers. And I think that is one of the best examples there.
Why do you think the idea of service members or soldiers building software is so sort of foreign to the current environment?
I don't think it's foreign. I think it's more of a we have never done this before. I think it's if we can educate and let our policymakers understand that why we are doing this, I think they will be more open to it. I truly understand that it's one of those things as we have never done it. So it's always hard for anybody psychologically to even understand that aspect of it. I think as things are moving, as I mentioned earlier, that special forces and others are already utilizing data scientists and other I think this is already happening. We are just trying to make it where we can make this in not just in one unique situation, but overall in the Army as well.
We're talking with the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army, Mr. Abdul Subhani. We're still monitoring for any questions we have from virtual land. But continuing on, I think maybe a question that I think maybe needs to get answered is, why do you think as an IT expert, a software development expert, why do you think it's so important to get end users involved in the software development process? Is that the value that the soldiers are providing?
Very good question. Yes, absolutely. Because the end user is the one who actually going to utilize this. And if they being involved initially in the discovery stage or initial phases, they will be the ones who can tell us exactly what they're looking for. And once they understand how the processes work, they will be the ones who will be able to do our testing. So we will be able to do the testing stage a lot quickly, a lot easily. And they will have a buy-in to it. I think that's what most important thing is, that they should have a buy-in before we are even designing or creating something.
Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I fully agree with what you just said. In the opening, you talked about a DevSecOps or a DevOps culture. And we talked about how that was kind of a buzzword, I think is what you said. In your mind, what is DevSecOps and what is a DevOps culture?
I think that the culture is something that what we have not utilized in DoD sector itself is we are more on those monolithic software innovations that we've been doing for the last 20, 30 plus years. And majority of that is that we are not understanding sometimes the concept of why we are creating the software. My idea, everybody has their own different explanation of DevSecOps or DevOps. It's more of how quickly, quickly, we can create something where we can have that to our end user. We have talked about agile software development. We have talked about waterfall. We have talked about all these things. But end of the day is what organization is needing right now. They do not want to wait another 3.5 years to find out what exactly got developed by a contracting company, and then we are going back to them and finding out that that did not work out. But how we can collaborate with those those contracting companies to find out how easily faster we will be able to develop and give it to the end users, because end users need the items now. Right now, they are not looking to waste time another 2.5, 3 years, and then come back and doing the testing. So I think user-centered design model is the best model in that sense. And I personally think the DevSecOps is what you created in your own organization. Every organization will have a different model of doing that.
What do you think are the reasons that DoD or Army or whatever DoD enterprise you want to characterize has had trouble adopting a DevOps or a DevSecOps sort of mindset and technologies?
I think it's one of those things that if we can have leadership to get a buy-in to it, then we can. So, for example, if DoD itself is understand and is willing to take over that aspect of it, that this is where we're going to go, I think personally it will be the right way, where then it can go into the forces, Army, Air Force, Navy, and others. I personally think it's hard to understand that aspect of it because the leadership does not have a buy-in to it. So, perfect example of Software Factory that we had so many distinguished visitors who came and saw. Secretary just came a couple of weeks ago. She was able to understand. Matter of fact, she actually did, thanks to you, did a little bit of coding as well. So she understood now that how exactly it can help support the soldiers and how fast it can go.
We're talking with Mr. Abdul Subhani, and we've got one of our first questions from virtual land, and we appreciate the question. The question is probably for your hat as the civilian aide for the Central Texas region. The question is what makes Central Texas a great place to innovate for the Department of Defense?
Great, thank you. I think personally, Central Texas is great places because, first of all, we have academia here. We have private companies, industry here. And of course, now having Army Futures Command, that of course really helps. And academia has done a great job on creating that ecosystem around it. And of course, organizations, some nonprofit organizations and others who are doing a great job on innovating, not just in the tech field, but in a lot of other fields as well. So having the right people in this community who has a background in DoD, that helps a lot. But of course, helping with the academia, as you know, Austin Community College has done a great job, and being a great partner for Software Factory, and UT system, of course, with Army Futures Command in general itself. So that's a huge plus.
Obviously, speaking with a little bit of authority for Software Factory and then also for Futures Command, I would add not just the fact that there's the local Austin ecosystem, but that local ecosystem also provides pretty direct connection to the national tech sector and to the national non-traditional industries, where companies that DoD doesn't normally work with can find great ways to leverage some of that technology, and really only find that in Austin. We have another question from Virtual Land for Mr. Subani, and it's along the same line. It's how can we create a pathway to find the commands that need innovation?
Very good point. And I think, of course, if you're talking about Army Software Factory, Vito can go into more detail on that. But of course, they are inundated with the information the commanders are looking for and so forth, as I mentioned earlier, to start talking to Software Factory itself. But as a small business or businesses who are looking to find out more information about that, I think the more and more I get some more information about that is small business, reps for each commands has a lot of information on that. Having those conversations right here with Army Applications Lab, I think that will be really helpful as well for you guys to have those direct connections. If you're thinking that there is a command who might be looking for something, I think having those conversations with Army Futures Command small business people will be also helpful, or contracting people. I know they do with COVID and so forth. I'm sure they are doing some forums where they're opening up on those kind of conversations as well. But this is something that Army Futures Command is doing a great job utilizing that Army Applications Lab.
As you said earlier, from your own personal experience in growing your own company, relationships, and today and tomorrow, a great way to get to know some of the people here in Austin and here with the Department of Defense that can help guide maybe some specific technologies to some folks that are looking for it.
Absolutely.
So we've taken a couple questions from Virtual Land. We're still wide open for some questions. We'll let those sort of queue up. But sort of back to you, sir. Let me ask you this question. You've had a unique opportunity to meet some of the soldiers at Army Futures Command around Central Texas at Fort Hood, and then, of course, at the Software Factory. What's your impression of the soldiers' willingness to innovate?
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. It really surprises me that how much talent that we already had and we were not utilizing after meeting with some of the great talent that we have in the Army, and then Software Factory soldiers who are already here, and they are doing an absolutely outstanding job. And I think that's another way of showing our leadership and policymakers that we already have the talent, how we were able to keep them with us, and making sure that they are able to utilize those skill sets, not just within the Software Factory, but outside the Software Factory, but within the Army ecosystem.
So if we have the talent that seems to be evident, and we've got such a great local non-traditional industry sort of base, how do we bridge that to make it part of an established Army model that can scale?
Very good question. I think majority of these things is having those conversations, and sometimes very tough conversations that we will be having with the industry, and with the commands itself. And of course, Army Futures Command is a platform basically that we can have those hard conversations. I think the bridging that gap that you're mentioning is something that we need to start utilizing these kind of forums and others. And I think having me as a civilian aid to SecArmy can also help utilize those venues for small and large organizations who are looking to have those hard conversations that they would like to have, or open conversations they like to have with the commanders, and who are looking to have this innovative way of getting not just a technology talent, but also I think we all are nowadays fighting for the talent who will be looking for commercial companies or the Army itself.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so you laid out lean startup, balanced teaming, user-centered design, agile. I think all of those sort of speak to something that those of us that have spent a minute or two in the military understand to be sort of common sense, and that's how we operate, especially in combat, right? Mission command principles tell us to empower down. So hopefully, are you saying that we can probably bridge that sort of gap from what the tech industry calls it versus how we practice it? It's just a communication issue?
No, I don't think it's just a communication issue. I think it might be a more than a communication issue, but I think having that understanding that what exactly is the user is looking for, and having that, bridging that gap. And I think that's what Software Factory should be doing a great job on, is finding that unique opportunities that a unit, a command is looking for, and then you are able to create those, understand those unique, basically an application or unique feature that they are looking for, which their big ERP systems are not able to do. And instead, it's going to take them another 3 to 4 years to get that design to develop. You are able to do that in 90 or 99 days. Those are the winning things for us. And once we will utilize that, we will understand that we are able to do that in such a short time, and we can scale that model within the Army itself. But I think that's where the marketing of itself, of the software development, the ideas, principles will guide itself.
So actually, great segue to another question from Virtual Land. So how does the Software Factory evaluate that a product meets the expectation of its service members?
Great question. I think you should be the one who should be answering that question. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question, whoever asked it. I think a couple things, right, that we look at. We look at the ability to meet a service member's needs, specifically as it relates to readiness, cost avoidance, and improving mission effectiveness for the end user. Those are three sort of guiding principles for the products that we aim to produce for soldiers. We, of course, use software, third-party software, whenever we don't have to customize something. So it's also a big part of what we do is that decision of, is something worthy of customization, or is it something you can just sort of buy off the shelf or direct another Army entity or DoD entity to say, hey, why don't you don't need us, maybe just go buy something else. And so with that sort of stuff, we look at cost to the Army or to the DoD, and then we look at those third-party dependencies, if there's any security vulnerabilities and that sort of stuff, and then we make those recommendations. And then the overall project selection is largely about how well we can partner with a unit, because I'm a firm believer that we're not just an entity that you can outsource software development to. I think that's where you sort of get into trouble. It's about how well you can partner with somebody to help solve their problem with technology. That's kind of what we really look for. And then, in akin to like a DIU or a Jake model, it's that matched level of investment for energy and for resourcing and for time. That's kind of how we evaluate what we go after.
I think the question also was that how it will meet the expectations. So once you have created, designed, developed, how it gets deployed.
Yeah, so constant user interaction and user feedback. Matter of fact, I think half the Software Factory is up at Fort Hood today doing weekly user interviews for the products that they're developing. And so for those of you out there who understand the difference between Agile versus waterfall development, kind of like Mr. Zivani was already saying, we're not developing in a vacuum. Everything that we develop has already been sort of validated that it has user value, and we don't continue on until we get that user validation. That makes sure that we don't get 2 years off schedule on something that nobody really ever wanted. So I hope that answers the question. Great question. Thanks for putting that up, Dylan. A little bit of a pause here as we wait to see if any other questions come on. Where do you think Software Factory is going, sir?
Well, I'm hoping that we can keep growing, and we can grow into where that we are showing some of the products, some of the ideas that not just our soldiers are doing, but also our policymakers can understand and see that what value our soldiers are bringing to it. I think it was a very good conversation with Sec Army when she came a couple of weeks ago. As you know, she was very enthused and happy to see what exactly our soldiers are doing and how they are interacting with not just within the soldier communities itself, and also how they are interacting with the industry partners as well. So,
is that maybe a second or a third order effect of this idea behind Futures Command, AAL, Software Factory, to provide? Are they serving as good case studies to provide Army senior leaders with how to navigate tech policy in a changing world?
Very good point. Yeah, I think that's exactly what, as you know, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, Mr. Bush was here too. I think this is another one of those things, having that those conversations, sometimes hard conversations, to understand that what changes that Software Factory is able to do. For example, DevSecOps model. I mean, how you have made a difference than what other DoD people were already doing. For example, Kessel Run, as we discussed earlier, how they are able to do it and what the difference you are making. Of course, that's working for them, and it's working for us. What we can do to make those lessons learned between each other. And I think DoD model itself, they will be able to understand that even more. But like we said earlier, that it's early. We are on our second year, really, and I'm hoping that as the time is growing, our products, we will be bringing in more. We will be creating, designing, and of course, soldiers will be the ones who will be telling us how effective we were.
I know we only have a couple minutes left. I think we could probably take maybe one or two more questions from virtual end if they appear. But one of the things I wanted to highlight about you, sir, for the time that we have left, is that you're also an accomplished author, and among your many Renaissance man sort of talents. And so you obviously have experience communicating some of the challenges and some of the where we sit as a nation with respect to changes in technology. How has writing that down, putting that on paper, communicating that to the world, how has that affected how you communicate to the DoD?
I think sometimes what we do, and especially in the Army, we make sure that we are using those 3-letter acronyms all the time, and I'm still learning on a day-to-day basis. Making everything in a layman terms, understanding that in a simple English, that's always better. For me, it works better anyways, as English is a second language. But I think it's always better to talk to non-technical people. And fortunately or unfortunately, our leadership, our policymakers, not all of them have a background in tech. And when we start to talk about Kubernetes and talk about DevSecOps, and I mean, they do not understand it. So how we can have that collaborative conversation with them in a way that they can understand in a very layman terms, I think that's the key of it. So all 3 books that I wrote, I made sure that it's in a very simple, straightforward conversation so they can understand it. How in some of the conversations, especially in DoD sector, cannot be in a very simple way because of confidentialities and others. But if we can have those honest conversations with our policymakers, I think they will be open to. I totally believe in it that they will be totally be open to having those hard conversations, how we can make that change.
Why do you think it's so hard for those of us? Sometimes it's called the digital divide, or it's called the tech haves and have-nots. Why is it so hard to sort of get those points across, do you think?
I seriously think it's who and what are getting advised to, right? I mean, if we can have those conversations openly in the DoD sector, where they can understand that we are making this change, and we are making this change for X and Y and Z reason, but that change will affect these 2 or 3 and 4 items, will be something which will be hard for us not to relay to some of the leadership and the policymakers. As you can imagine, technology has done a lot of great things for us, but then some of the things that we have done, it cost a lot of money, and it comes down to it. The policymakers are always thinking about what it will affect us, what it will affect in the long term of making those hard decisions right now, and how it can change, not just, and I think if we can show what the Army software factory model is, having the soldiers involvement up front, using our current talent and not outsourcing or contracting it out, how we can utilize with our industry. And I think that's huge for us. Having those hard conversations, I think personally it will be hard to not say that it's changing. It might be changing in a slower pace than me and you want, but I think we're in a better path forward.
Do you think that we're afforded the amount of time that we need to sort of demonstrate the value here? Is it time, like you said, time and resources is always how a program evaluator or a policymaker looks at things. What's your sense there?
A good point. Now, I think as we discussed, it's 12 months. We need a lot more than 12 months for Software Factory to at least give some results to it. As a software company executive, and a lot of companies who are developing softwares, I mean, it takes a lot more time than 12 months to even develop a software application sometimes, depending on how big and other things are associated with it. So I think 36 months is always a good way of looking at and thinking that how successful or how it's working with our end users. End of the day, it comes down to it, what we have created, designed, developed, deployed, and then we can make that decision.
I think we have time for one more question, and what I'll ask you, sir, is how optimistic are you about the future of defense innovation, specifically as it relates to the DoD innovating in and of itself, and then collaborating with an innovation ecosystem like we have here in Austin?
Well, first of all, I think Austin community is doing a great job on having that relationship building with the DoD sector itself. I'm really happy to see forums like this, because I think this has really helped create that ecosystem. Having those people around us makes a huge difference. So I personally think I'm very hopeful that this will continue growing. And of course, Army Futures Command is doing a great job on creating this, helping innovators, helping small businesses, helping large businesses and others to be in this space of Department of Defense.
Couldn't really put it any better than that. Let me say, first of all, on behalf of all of Army Futures Command and the Army Software Factory, thank you to Mr. Shibani for being so generous and gracious with his time and lending us some of his expertise and perspectives. Sir, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And for those of you out there listening, I think we're going to take a very short break, but if I could just tease you, we're about to be joined by our first panel at the Software Factory, moderated by our very own Chief Product Officer, Miss Hannah Hunt. So don't go away.